African Diaspora, Dr. Moses Banda, and President of the Organization of African Political Parties Forum, Dr. Charles Sankala. Good evening to you both, and thank you so much for your time. I'll begin with you, Dr. Sankala. Certainly an interesting turn that Zimbabwe has taken to expand some of these policies. Some have described this new move as one that could further fuel unemployment if it's not handled correctly.
Yes, good evening. Thank you very much for having me. You know, it's not a new move per se, like what most people think, but I think, in my sense, it's a political move, which Zanu-PF have used time again to give confidence to the people of Zimbabwe that the government really cares about them. In the history of Africa, indigenization policies as the ones which has caused to have problems within the continent, especially in Zimbabwe. The last 40 years, they've been trying to promote the population of Zimbabwe, ignoring those who are coming with skills and expertise from outside Zimbabwe. We can see if they make that policy go ahead, I think they've not been honest to themselves and to their former president, Robert Mugabe, who signed the treaty when he was chairperson of the African Union unity regarding the Agenda 2063, which gave birth to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. You know, I think this is a reverse apartheid to the rest of the African continent, even if though that more than 70% of Zimbabweans are self-employed. I don't know how they're going to implement it. As well as they must look outside the Zimbabweans, 15 million Zimbabweans which are outside the Zimbabwe, of which 7 million of them are in South Africa, you know, some 1 million in Zambia. What will be the impact if should they provide this policy to go through? And as well, they must look at, is this the solution? I don't think it's a solution that will help the Zimbabwean people to come out of slumber, where of abject poverty and unemployment rates, even though they are talking about reserving those industries. Those industries are the economical drivers, you know, which they've got no control.
And Dr. Sabanda, a move like this, some have said it's good that the country looks set to putting its own citizens ahead of foreign nationals, while others are saying, as Dr. Sankala has also said there, that this is reverse apartheid. What kind of impact is an expansion of these policies set to have?
Thank you very much. I think, unfortunately, maybe the worst part of this particular, development is that it's very ironic in that just about a day or so ago, we had Zimbabwe saying that it is the first now to implement a free visa for SADC countries and to promote, the free trade zone, within SADC. And we also are very aware, I think as Dr. Sankala said, that there is a huge population of Zimbabweans that are in South Africa. Now, what that means in essence is that this is going to fuel, tensions and hatred, towards, Zimbabweans that are in South Africa. Simply because if you look at the Zimbabweans in South Africa, a lot of them are in, small and medium enterprises. And what that means is that now there is going to be a backlash, because people are going to be saying, but why didn't you go to your country where basically, you've got all these industries that have been reserved for you? So we're looking at a situation where, in order to try and, play the political game towards 2023, Zanu-PF is trying to sing to people that are unemployed, that have no funding. I mean, if you reserve, those sectors for people that don't have a single cent or dime to support themselves, what are they going to do with it? It is, in fact, another way of trying to ensure that, those that are in politics are going to be the ones that are taking over, those industries at the expense of the ordinary Zimbabweans. And as Dr. Sankala said, remember in 2007, 2008, the same bill was signed by President Mugabe. And in fact, a lot of people that were kicked out of Zimbabwe, at the dawn of the century, were kicked out because of the indigenization policy that was saying it is giving 51% of the companies to Zimbabweans. And all those companies, particularly in Bulawayo, have, closed down. So this is just a move that is so short-sighted, but which is going to have serious repercussions for a huge population of Zimbabweans that are particularly in South Africa, where we see South Africa right now is trying to deal, with the same issues of unemployment, and a lot of South Africans, worried about the fact that a lot of the sectors are taken by, migrants.
And I'm going to ask both of you to pause there for now as we go for a quick break. But when we come back, I'd really like us to really zoom into what you've just said, Dr. Sibanda, because we do have some people that we have spoken to even in the week who are forming part of Operation Dudula, who are, really looking to say that for them, they want certain sectors then reserved for the locals, and that's part of the ripple effect that you are talking to us then around this particular policy. But let's continue then when we come back from this. Let's continue our conversation on Zanu-PF Party's campaign for foreign nationals to be excluded from operating businesses in certain areas of the economy with the President and CEO of the African Diaspora, Dr. Busumuzi Sibanda, and President Organization of African Political Parties Forum, Dr. Charles Sankala. Just before we continue our conversation, I'd like us to listen to one person who represents Operation Dudula, Den Khadebe, to get a sense of what their operation is about and what they want to ensure with this particular operation.
We want to ensure, as Minister Thulas Nxesi, sometime in June, I'm not sure of the exact date, he did issue a directive when it comes to the employment of foreign nationals. And yet we still have industries that are 80, others 100% foreign nationals. And our people are being squeezed out of those jobs. Now the question is, how did they acquire the permits to be employed in sectors that I won't declare them as a scarce skills? Because the policy is very clear that you can import a scarce skills once you have proven satisfactory that you have failed to acquire that particular skill locally, then now you can import that skill. Now, if you have now your entertainment industry, your malls, your securities and whatever, employing strictly foreign nationals while South Africans are idling in the townships, having nothing to do, it doesn't make sense. So I don't know if the Department of Labor, do they have inspectors? If they do, what are they doing?
Dr. Sankala, at the back of that, what we also then hear is from the Zanu-PF that regardless of which government comes into power, this needs to be effected, and it's indiscriminately. But when you then listen to what we've just heard now, and also look at President Mnangagwa, who scrapped this when he came into power, but now his political party wants it back, does it paint a picture then of a president who is seemingly losing control?
Yes, definitely. This is a management issue that the populations of countries are not managed properly. These are the symptoms that we find that most of the population are not in employment. And it is short of words to suggest that foreigners are taking up jobs. I've never heard of any complaint from a citizen within the continent or outside the world where they're complaining that I was about to apply for this job and the job was given to somebody else. There's no such complaint. Yes, we sympathize with Zimbabwe. They've been having a very hardship, in terms of coming out from the economical meltdown, but suggesting such things like this, would drive the country into war, not only within Zimbabwe, like what you've mentioned. In South Africa as well, they will take up the arms. That's the reason why you're not employed, because a Zimbabwean took your job. We're creating war amongst ourselves. And I think leaders have tested the policies of indigenization, including the B policies within South Africa, which lacks the capacity to police them. Laws must be made, and yes, We need police to go follow and make sure that those policies are implemented, with also bearing in mind the impact of those policies which have been made. We have already lost, if it is in South Africa, we've lost a lot of equipment, and a lot of people have lost their lives because of fighting against those people who are employed because they are Zimbabweans or they are Zambians. They are barely classified as foreigners. So can we find a solution where opportunities, they can match the population wherever the countries are? We must understand one word which I talk about many times. We fail to understand the word migration. Migration is real, and it's going to be here for a very long time. It is estimated that in 3 years from now, every 9th person out of 10 will be a foreign national from a different country. The question is, how can we get use of migration, to good use? We can look at how United States of America dealt with the Spaniards and the Colombians who flooded the United States of America. They also came up with such policies like this. And as well recently from former President Donald Trump, who mentioned something now bigger, that he'll build the wall against Mexico. Those things, they were never going to work. The question is, how can we utilize the skills in good use, by maximizing the opportunity, by industrialization of our countries, making sure that there's quite a lot of opportunities, that those who want to work, they can be employed in industries, and those who want to run companies, they can run companies freely. If we come up with policies such as one they're debating in Zimbabwe, where they say there must be ownership, in terms of, spaza shops, these small enterprises, small shops, you can't give somebody a 50% or 60% ownership to work together. The margins are very small. I think we must really look at the impact, and that these policies are part of the collapsing of our economies within the continent, especially Zimbabwe, which needs to stand up. Zimbabwe is not a landlocked. It is surrounded by a lot of countries, and every minute, every hour, these people are passing through that country, going somewhere else. I can give an example. Those who are going to DRC, they pass through Zimbabwe. Those who are going to Kenya, Nairobi, Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia, they are passing through Zimbabwe. And through that migration of people traveling, either on holiday or other things, they seek other opportunities, either marriage or work.
And Dr. Sibanda, I just want us to listen to this particular soundbite that looks at whether or not this is xenophobic, because Mike Mlondeni doesn't seem to agree that as part of Operation Dudula, what they do is xenophobic. I'd like us to just listen to what he just had to say.
We are not xenophobic, but remember that since when have foreigners been in South Africa? And we've lived with them for a long time, and we've never had issues up until we started having the problems with these labor issues, where companies now started employing majority of foreigners. As I'm sitting here, there's a number of companies that have expelled just from last year, just during the COVID period. They've expelled most of the South Africans, and they're sitting with 100% foreigners. And people will not know that, because people, they're not involved, or rather they're not in that space, so they wouldn't know. And it baffles me to keep hearing people disputing all these claims, because these people, they live among us, and we work with them. And all these issues that we keep raising are the issues that we are facing on a daily basis, far from all these people that say, no, you guys are xenophobic.
And when you look at the reaction of some on social media, Vuyo Zungula from the ATM says, when we say the same thing in South Africa, you label us xenophobic, and all countries do protect and prioritize their own citizens, yet you don't call them xenophobic. The sectors mentioned here are sectors where citizens trade for survival.
Well, look, I think one thing that we need to be very clear about is that, xenophobia is basically, hatred or discrimination, against any other person, based on their nationality or where they, come from. And then we then have protectionism, where, for example, what we have seen right now happening in Zimbabwe, and what we also saw in Gauteng at the beginning of, the year with the township bill. Now, that protectionism, for as long as it does not culminate into people attacking each other, it is looked at as merely protectionism. And it gets, and it gets to the levels where people look at it as xenophobic, where now, people begin to attack, and fight with other people based on their nationality. So when we look at what the gentleman from with Tudula is basically saying, we must then begin to appreciate the fact that when somebody says, if there are foreign nationals that have been expelling South Africans at work, because they are, South Africans, that on its own is a form of xenophobia, because it does not necessarily have to be somebody saying, I am a national, only that have got a particular hatred towards another person. So I think what we are looking at here is that governments are the ones that are actually bringing or, are facilitating this hatred, amongst individuals because of their policies, which are actually facilitated or that actually brought about because of their failure to provide for their people, because of their failure to deal with unemployment. We should be looking at situations where government is funding natives so that they can enter into business. Governments are not funding natives, but they are then blaming, those migrants that come in and enter into businesses, that are already not properly funded, that where there is space. If there was no space for people to enter into those sectors, people would not enter because the market would be saturated. But the markets are not saturated, showing that there is a need for people to enter into those markets. And in order for people to do that, the locals to do that, they need funding. Governments should be providing a lot of funding to their natives or their citizens to ensure that they can enter easily, not to create barriers, through protectionism, which is a very serious sign of failed economics.
So how then does government begin, Dr. Sibanda, to balance between this protectionism, as you call it, and xenophobia, to ensure then that there's enough for everyone and we don't find ourselves in a situation where we were in 2008?
I think the first thing that government needs to do is basically, look, we've got the youth, the Youth Development Trust. We've got the small and medium enterprise, corporations that are meant to provide funding without corruption, ensure that everyone has equal access who is a native to those funds in order for them to start or enter into these, business areas or markets. But the government merely is more on lip service. And when that money is made available, instead of being allocated or given to citizens equitable and in terms of the law, and ensuring that those that lack certain skills are upgraded, given some training so that they can enter into these areas, they keep giving the money to their relatives, to their friends, and this leads to this corruption where we see certain families and individuals, getting richer every day and the ordinary people getting poor. The starting point is to audit these projects that are meant to facilitate growth and entrance into business by natives. If these are not properly audited and there's no follow-up, the money will keep going to the same people. That is why even tenders, they keep going to the same groups of individuals instead of allowing new people to enter into this particular, business or markets. That's why you would see that from Limpopo all the way to Cape Town, you might find a single security company, guarding government premises and all that. It's because it is done it is as a result of corruption instead of ensuring that there is equitable distribution. Check in people that come from, the rural areas, young people, the unemployed, give them the necessary skills to enter into business. Let them partner with those businesses that have already grown so that at the end of the day, there is creation of employment and people are also accessing these markets, rather than to say, let us close out those that have entered the market. These people that enter these markets, either in Zimbabwe or South Africa, that are migrants, they are not entering with government assistance. They are doing it on their own. But government is trying to kick them out and blame them for their own failures.
Dr. Sankala, the ruling Zanu-PF says that this move is looking at ensuring that it upscales its entrepreneurs and also increases the number of those then that are running their own businesses. And they're looking to now start fundraising so they can be able to pilot this particular initiative. Where do they look to for such funding?
Yeah, you see, it is very unfortunate that our focus in Zimbabwe in terms of indigenization has been short-sighted. You know, they are not really looking at the actual effect. I can give an example here in South Africa. I've got a friend of mine who buys equipment from auction, from those companies who's been funded by either SIDA, what Dr. Sibanda is mentioning. Somebody, an indigenous, can be funded through SIDA funding, and when they have those equipment, they run only 1 to 2, 3 months. They fail to run the business, and these equipments worth millions and millions. They end up at an auction, and they are bought by these gentlemen at a fraction of the price that it was sold, which is merely 10%. So the education of people being entrepreneurs, it has to start from early child development. It's not something that somebody can pick up from an old age because of lack of employment, and you empower that person with money. You must remember, money is not enough. There's certain things which has to be made for somebody to be disciplined financially and to be like an entrepreneur. So the government of Zimbabwe, again, they are going to make the population of Zimbabwe to not only fight against the other nationals from other countries where Zimbabweans are, but they are running down again the country because it's not practical. They won't implement it. Like I mentioned earlier, 70% of people are self-employed. So if 70% of the population is self-employed, how are they going to make sure that the foreigners, they do not get those jobs? These people are working for themselves. It's quite difficult for somebody to come from outside and to go and work in Zimbabwe. In fact, as we are speaking, that the restaurants and the packing and packaging industries, these are still within the Zimbabweans' hands, because no one is going to go and accept a slave wage, you know, in Zimbabwe. A doctor in Zimbabwe is paid 3,000 rand, at most maybe 4,000 rand a month. So a foreigner wouldn't step a feet to go and get paid that money within that country. They are looking elsewhere, maybe Zambia, Tanzania, and Botswana. I think Zimbabwean government in parliament, you know, to support the citizen is by start producing for the citizens, either the manufacturing and farming, where they've got very good arable land, and as well as in the mining sector, where they make sure that their citizens are well looked after. Looking after the citizens is not chasing other nationalities. And when you talk about xenophobia and protectionism, what my panelist has mentioned, you know, there's very fine line for you to differentiate those terms. Immediately you mention the word foreigner, we must reserve these jobs for foreigner. Already you are creating hatred for other nationalities, and you're creating hatred for even those companies which are coming from outside. They must look in within Zimbabwe there. Most of the companies are South African companies, Pick and Pay, ShopRite, Spar, and many others. They are coming from outside, and they are coming with the expertise of people who has to run those companies. So if Zimbabwe wants to choose up to chase those companies, is by telling them that you shouldn't employ your expertise. We want you to employ our citizen.
All right. Thank you so much to you both for your time. It definitely looks like this is one to watch, as we see then if this in fact does forge ahead beyond the cabinet discussions that are currently taking place. That's President and CEO of the African Diaspora, Dr. Moses Banda, and President of the Organization of African Political Parties Forum, Dr. Charles Sankara.